Sister, I'm so glad you've been able to show up here. I don't know, that backdrop is proud and red. I love it. I love it. Hey, welcome to this edition of Black Beat, y'all. You know, we got some exciting things going on right now, but this sister here, boy, I'm gonna tell you, she's moving fast and she's moving strong. And I don't know how we gonna all be able to keep up with her, but boy, when it hits the ground, her timing is now, and we're glad that we have an opportunity to spend some time with her today. So let's get this thing rolling.
Okay, so welcome, Akasha. Thanks so much. Do you want to just kind of introduce yourself, who you are, what your current role is?
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction, John. I really appreciate it. That was phenomenal. My name is Akasha Lawrence Spence. I am currently the state representative for House District 36. House District 36 includes downtown Portland, all the way to the South Waterfront, including where OHSU is, back up to the Northwest and Southwest Hills, all the way to Multnomah Village.
Well, so you got it like that?
Yeah. It's
well, you right in the heart of where the beasts live, huh?
Yeah.
Girl, we ain't see you coming. Go on, finish doing what you're doing.
Yeah, it's intense. You know, there's PSU in the district. There's the Portland 5 Center for the Arts, the concert venues. You know, the South Waterfront, which has its own, you know, issues and history. And then all the way back to the Northwest and the Southwest Hills, again, back to Multnomah Village, which is, you know, experiencing its own sort of economic development and growth period right now. So it's definitely a lot. It's definitely a lot going on in this district.
Well, I'm trying to tell you.
Old Town, Chinatown, all of that. It's a lot. It's a robust district. It's a lot.
You handling all of that? Why we ain't seen you before this? I mean, where they been hiding you at around here?
I'm around. I've been doing a lot. You know, part of what I self-describe as is a civic activist. I started a women of color group based on civic engagement, financial empowerment, and community stewardship. And so, you know, I think that there are a lot of people who are doing some really great work, especially around Black and Brown empowerment. And for me, everything that I do centers around economic justice. I don't believe that we can have true environmental justice or social justice if we don't have the economics to support it. And so for me, starting that group and having a lot of workshops that help women of color especially figure out how to manage their finances, figure out how to own a home. Ownership is so important when we think about communities and who gets to decide and what decision-making power, where decision-making power really exists. And that exists in people who own things and the entities who are able to say that this, one of the things that I talk about a lot is the removal of the food carts on Southwest 10th in Washington, right? To build a Waldorf Astoria. And what existed before they removed all those food cart pods was community. It was a place where people, you have that huge transportation hub, you have the MAX coming through, you have bus lines, you have the streetcar, and you have Target there. There's PSU comes down the hill on Broadway, and you know, it's a really active space. And a lot of people use that hub to buy breakfast and lunch and meet people. And it was a good place where people of different socioeconomic statuses would interact, right? I would frequently buy lunch for somebody who was houseless or experiencing food insecurity, right? And, you know, we would all kind of gather there. And, you know, when the removal of those pods was happening, those people who made that land valuable, you know, who often were immigrants, who came from places where they were probably doctors and lawyers and engineers and came to America because they were fleeing something and tried to find a better life and brought a little bit of their homeland to us, right? Mm-hmm. And shared that with us in community. And they were completely displaced, and that was no longer seen as valuable, although they're the ones who added value, right? And they had no right of recourse. They couldn't stop that development from happening to them because they didn't own anything.
Right, right.
And so for me, it's like the way that we get development to happen that is equitable, that is inclusive, that is that creates the Portland that we all want and deserve to see is through community ownership, is through local ownership of community resources, which includes land and the ownership of real property.
Wow, wow. So you're nailing it straight off the back, Representative. But what I'm wondering is, so you look like you just came out of college. You just get out of school. I mean, so tell me from whence you came. Tell me, bring us forward. How'd you get to where you is now, right now? Because you start to scare me a little bit. I mean, you're coming here, you're knocking them down. So tell me a little bit about where you come from and what got you to where you is right now.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. My parents.
I knew you had a little bit of bite in you. Welcome. You know, a T-shirt that we coming out with that says, "You ain't got to be born black in Oregon for your blackness to count." You know.
That's exactly true. These stories are the same no matter where you are. And my parents were immigrants. They came to America separately from different places and met in New York. I was an only child for my mother, and in 2017, my mother died quite suddenly. It came out of nowhere. My mother was otherwise healthy, and that changed the trajectory of my life, right? I was at an architectural firm working there, and just seeing the way that, life just happens to you, and feeling powerless, right? It really made me feel like there was something, and I always knew this because my first degree was in political science and anthropology, right? And I was always interested in the theory of the state, right? Like, we are born and we tacitly consent to be governed, right? Wow. But what does being governed mean? For me, it's a contract, right? They do certain things, and we have a certain responsibility to hold them accountable. And so for me, when my mother passed away and I started to really look around and think about the ways in which our government and our healthcare system was not being held accountable to us, it really sparked in me. And then seeing that removal of those food cart pods, it really sparked in me this question of who gets to decide, right? I was angry that my mother died, and I felt like she didn't need to, right? That it was a failure of our healthcare system. That it was a failure of the institutions that we consent to be governed by or to help us, right? We're in this relationship with these governing bodies, whether it's school or the police or our elected officials, city hall, etc. We are expecting them to advocate for us. We're expecting them to do right by us, right? And they don't do that unless we show up and hold them accountable. They don't do that unless we start to question decision-making power. They don't do that unless we insert ourselves into the conversations, right? One of the things that people keep saying is, people need a seat at the table, but I don't want a seat at a table that's inept, that's corrupt, that is not equitable, right? I'd rather build something else completely. I'd rather sit on the floor than sit at your table, right? So it's like, for me, that was my awakening, and it made me think about, well, how am I going to ensure that it no longer feels like things are happening to us, but we are making them happen for us.
Girl, you sure I ain't know your daddy? Because I must have been out with him or something. That girl, because you sounded pretty familiar to me. And it's so ironic that when I listen to you talk about the things that ignited you, and especially around the topic and issue of land use, because historically, when we do look at the significance of how Blacks are treated on a national, I think that when we look at the microcosm of Portland, okay, and in Oregon itself and its essence, is that the only real stipulation that was a real difference between the Blacks anywhere else versus the Blacks in Oregon was, ironically, this issue about land, opportunity to own land. And that, this state was probably one of the only state that really held that line on that and expanded it out for as long as they did. And still to this day, land mitigation is part of what really the racism, the systemic racism that we're dealing with. So I find that really ironic, because you hit it right on the head, because for as many years I've been around here doing what I've been doing, one of the things that as I look back on a lot of the stuff that what this state is doing versus and how black people arrive to the state of consciousness that they're in, why they do the things that they do, like this old rhetoric that talks about crab in a bucket, all of that kind of stuff, is that it is one of the few places where there was a forced clanness. There was a force for them to come together and protect their own personal interests, because it appeared that the external world did not really give a shit about whether or not they had land or not. So that whole clandestine reality, I think, to me, when I look at the pathology of it all, a lot of it stems from that. So I find it rather like a thumbs up for you to be entering it from that perspective in your mind, because I believe that truly is where the truth about the growth and the racism and all of those systemic problems that we're having is rooted there. So right on to you. Big ups on that piece of it. So talk to me a little bit about, go ahead. What were you
I just wanted to respond to that. I think that, yes, that situation happened to Black people everywhere in America, right? Like, even when you were able to buy land, what happened in the 1960s through 80s was, completely bifurcating neighborhoods with the interstate highway programs, right? And so it's like, even when you did have ownership, there was always this
mitigating reality
legacy of the institution taking it back from you.
Right.
So even when you owned it, they still had this power to take it away and
right.
to devalue it, right? So it's not just an Oregon story. It's something that unites us all across this country, because it happened to everybody. It completely happened to everybody.
Big ups on that, and I appreciate you shouting that out that way, because we say around here all the time, bikeways, pathways, throughways, highways, they're all mitigating realities for them to come and somehow or another continue this systemic racism that they have in terms of the control over the land, So tell me, so what made you decide to run for office? How'd that all come into the game? How'd you get there?
So technically, I didn't run for office because my predecessor resigned. She stepped down from the position so that she could run for another position. And so what that triggered was an appointment process. And through that appointment process, I was approached by some community-based organizations and said, "Oh, would you love to run for this?" And I said no. I was like, absolutely not. I don't want to be a part of this at all. And then they kept asking me, and I kept being like, are you guys not listening? I keep telling you no, and this is not what I want to do. And then what happened was we realized that the person, my predecessor, was going to step down before the short session that just happened in January. And so they were going to need somebody to step in to fill that seat, right? To be a legislator. And so I said, well, we need somebody to placehold, right? Because there were already 4 candidates in the field, like knocking on doors and creating pamphlets and really hedging these vast campaigns. And I said, well, we need somebody who's just going to sit there and who knows the issues, who is going to do some really great work, but is not going to run, because the people should decide. For me, we look at the way that democracy was eroded in 2016 with international actors really trying to usurp the vote from Americans, right? And so for me, it was like democracy is on a thread that is thinning right now. And we need to ensure that for most people, the only touch point they have with their democracy is their vote. And so we should ensure that whomever they want to have sit in that seat for the long term is decided by them, and not a small group of passionate, people who would sit in that nominating committee and the Multnomah County Commissioners, right? So for me, it was like, well, we need this. And people were like, get out of here. That's not how it works. And then the chair, Deborah Kafori, came out, I think it was on January 4th or 5th, and said, we want a placeholder candidate. And then my phone started ringing off the hook. So then I said, oh, you guys didn't find somebody else to do this? And they were like, no. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'll do it.
I wish I'd have found you sooner than this, because you'd have been running for a whole lot more than this. Because I tell you, you come out of, but anyway, you on the whip right about now. So come on. So Fawn, I know I see you sitting there smiling a little bit. I know you got a question or two you got on your mind. What you thinking about?
Well, so you that's how you got into politics, but your background, you said a little bit about that, but you're a designer as well, right? So you spoke a little bit about that. But now in this position that you're at, you found yourself on the Ways and Means Commission. Is that right?
So I'll just backtrack a little bit. So again, my first degree was in political science, right? So I worked for Senator Schumer in New York. I worked on campaigns in New York, and I did all of that. And because I was young and arrogant to some degree, I did not understand bipartisan compromise. And when I saw bipartisan compromise, it really turned me off from politics. And I got a little disillusioned because I felt like, what are we compromising here? Are we compromising people who need you to fight for them? Or are we compromising so that something gets done that's better than nothing, right? And I couldn't reconcile compromise at that point. And so I felt like there were other ways to get the job done and to do good work. And so then that's when I went into design, and I got a degree in architecture, interior architecture, and I started working in architecturally, and then started to realize that, again, that everything is political. We had a project to do the new Lincoln High School, to rebuild Lincoln High School, and that was contingent upon a measure passing, right? That measure where it was like, let's get the lead out of our schools, let's rebuild our schools aren't seismically found, we have to do all this work. And that was contingent upon the people voting for this measure, right? And so for me, again, everything came back to full circle, that everything is political. What gets built and the way we build it, where money comes from, and what projects we decide to fund, who gets those projects, everything is political. Yes. And the moment that we think that we can get away from it or disassociate from it, then we have taken ourselves away from the decision making and where real power exists. And so that was how I got back into politics,
Right.
Well, Fawn, before you go on, but I'd like to make sure that our listeners have framed that and heard what she said about that, because I think that it's something in the Black community is that, at least even for myself, even back in the beginning, was that I used to say, I don't do that. I don't do politics. I stay away from politics because that's white people's things or something like that. But for me right now, and as I'm so in alignment with you, Ms. Spencer, on the realization that, everything is politics, and Black people need to start recognizing that those touch points that you're talking about, our lives are really today are rooted in our ability to influence the governing bodies that influence us and take care of the things that we need in our community. So word up on that. I wanted to make sure that people hear that, is you got to get involved with politics. But go ahead.
Well, I mean, obviously we're in the smack dab. You have this position, which is smack dab in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. You also have the opportunity of sitting on the House's Ways and Means Commission. So I'm sure that's being impacted now. Is that being impacted significantly now by the relief funding that's coming through? And what are you guys having to do on that committee?
So I'm not on Ways and Means.
You're not? Okay.
I was on public safety Ways and Means. So there's a general Ways and Means, and then there are branches.
Economic.
Yeah, there are branches off of it, and I was on public safety Ways and Means committee as well as judiciary, and Yeah, but to answer that question, there is going to be an emergency board meeting this Thursday, and that is the legislature's response right now. What we're able to do right now to allocate funds on a state level to in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So right now, there's going to be money allocated based on the Joint Special Committee on Coronavirus Response that was held early in March, where the committee heard testimony from the business community, testimony from unions and workers and people who are on the front lines, and figuring out, well, what do we need to do? Where do we need to invest money right now? And how do we help to fortify our communities to ensure that we not only weather this storm, but we come out on the other side better than where we started. And so that right now, the E-Board is a limited capacity legislative body. They can only touch money that was in the emergency fund. So that is, I think there's right now $30 million in the emergency fund, and they can't completely deplete the whole fund, or 50 million, I'm sorry, it's 50 million, and they can't deplete the whole fund because we're approaching fire season, and there are other things that you want to just always have reserve money that you can go in and be able to allocate if there is something that comes up. But I think they're prepared to spend upwards of 30 million of that money in response to COVID-19, in response to helping to get money into the hands of workers who are undocumented, because that's one of the things that unemployment benefits cannot do because of their tie to the federal government. They cannot give money to workers who are undocumented. And those workers are frontline workers. They're people who are farm workers. They're people who are working in our supermarkets and things like that. But if you don't have a social security number, if you don't have a green card, if you don't have any of those things, you can't get unemployment insurance.
Well,
and so,
go ahead. Yeah. Well, also, you know, in terms of like entrepreneurship, we know a lot of businesses just launched this year. Some businesses launched at the end of last year. So their 2019 footprint really is in existence.
right.
But they went from, I'm just opening up business, I'm starting, to, you know, this. Where are the resources for them?
Yeah, so there is a program, a PAU program. I want to tell you exactly what that stands for. But it is a program that is supposed to help those independent contractors and those small businesses that don't have that footprint as yet. And it is through the federal government, but you have the ability to get more funding that helps you with being able to stave off going out of business and not being able to put food on the table as well, because you don't have that pay stub or something that shows proof of growth, or that you have a viable business. So I'm trying to open it up right now. I can also give you guys, one of the things that my office has been doing is we've created this living document on Google Docs that is a resource that every time that we get updates from either the federal government or from the state, where we have resources for people to tap into and to look into, we have them here on this Google document that helps them to navigate the process and connects them with people who will help them to fill out the applications, because a lot of these applications are not translated, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of our people who live in our state do not have English as their first language. And so it's very important that we help our nonprofits, who are that connective tissue between the government and our communities, help them to help people navigate the system and help them to understand how to fill out the applications and really get that money. So it's called the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, and it'll be launching hopefully by the end of this week, if not early next week. And it is for people who would be previously ineligible for unemployment insurance. So those are people who are self-employed contractors, people who are gig economy workers. A lot of people work for Uber and Lyft and Caviar, et cetera, and were not previously able to apply for a UI. And so this is a program to help them and to give them the money that's needed.
Are those loans? Are those grants?
No, it's just like similar to unemployment insurance. So one of the things, it's just like you apply for it and you'll get a check every week. One of the things that I will caution people to do is on the application for your unemployment insurance and for this PAU program, they're going to ask you whether this money should be tax exempt or not. Do not let your money get tax exempt. Pay the taxes on it, because at the end of the year or next year when you're filing, you'll owe money on that money. So you want to ensure that you get the taxes taken out upfront.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good to know. So how's that fund doing? Is that in danger of being depleted? All of them probably are, right?
No, so that one hasn't officially launched yet. That application is launching sometime. It should be by tomorrow, hopefully. But you know, we're seeing so much unemployment that is unequivocal to what even happened in 2008. And so our agencies, our government agencies are overrun, they're overwhelmed, right? And they're having a lot of trouble processing the amount of applications that are coming in. So a lot of people have been reaching back out to us saying, I've applied 3 weeks ago and I haven't heard anything. And one of the things we say is, did you get a confirmation that your application was accepted? And once you do that, then the money will come. And it's just slow. It's just very slow because our system is overworked. Our computer system is antiquated, and they have hired, I think, over 600 people to service the need because the need is so great. And that's statewide. That's in our state.
Okay, so if there's any problems with the application, you missed a date, you forgot to initial this, or you misinput something, does that disqualify you, or will somebody follow up with you on those things?
Yeah, so somebody would follow up with you because they have to do a phone interview with you, or they're trying to do a lot of them online, but there will be follow-up. There has to be.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like there's a little bit of something for everybody, but so John and I, we put out an issue last year. It was called The Almighty Dollar, prior to all of this, right? It was kind of foreshadowing. But we talked about some of the programs that the city of Portland were putting out for its minority communities to help generate wealth creation for communities of color and disadvantaged communities. And that was their strategic plan from 2015 to 2020. And then 2015 hit. So that was being planned in 2014. And when 2015 hit, it's a little bit like the COVID-19 response. It's like stepping into this cash machine where this cash is whirling all around, right? And people are trying to grab it. And then by the time a lot of folks even realize the process or corral their data or get into the pipeline or pathway to be in line to be in the cash booth, that cash is gone,
yeah.
Right? Yeah. And it's a flurry of activity, right? Mm-hmm. And you said, and I appreciate that you're creating a living Google Doc for this. That sounds fantastic, because every day, I know I'm getting 4 and 5 COVID relief here, COVID relief there. Here's what you need to know. And it's coming from like 15 different sources, and you're just like, oh, okay, I already got that one. Is that new? Is this new? It's like the discerning ability. It's pure chaos. It really is. What are you guys hearing regarding that kind of thing? And what would you advise people to do in terms of, staying focused on getting the support that's out there for us?
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that it's chaotic, because it is, right? This is an uncharted, unprecedented time in our history. And I think that, part of what we're going to learn from this is how to create emergency response that is not just about the health side, but about the economic side, right? There has to be a large debriefing of how do we navigate this, right? Because anything that happens, like health-wise or otherwise, will always impact people economically, because again, like you said, it goes back to the almighty dollar. Everything whittles back down to money. That said, you know, like you said, there's a lot of information coming at people, and it's hard to figure out, again, how to navigate. And one of the things that I keep championing is our nonprofits and our community-based organizations. They're the champions because they are truly the intermediary. I said connective tissue earlier, but it's very true that they're the people in between the government and the people. They help you to navigate, right? And on that list, we also add navigators, people that you can reach out to help you understand, well, here's my situation. What can I apply for? What will be a waste of my time, right? What if I apply for it, I don't qualify for? How can I navigate this truly unprecedented time, and how do I get the money that's needed to help me stay afloat, right? Whether that's your business or your family or otherwise, right? They're also the ones who are rallying for the worker relief fund. You know, they're the ones who petition your government. When we think of lobbyists, we tend to think of banks and corporate lobbyists, but your nonprofits are the lobbyists for the people.
Right.
They are the people who fund and get the money and put the pressure on your elected officials to think about you and to think about your needs and to prioritize them. So that they are the ones who I think that when you're feeling like I'm not sure what to do, those are the people that you should connect with first. Because again, that is who they are. That's where they've set up, is to be that intermediary. Again, elected officials will create these lists, like the one that we have is very comprehensive. It's in a chart form. It'll help you navigate. You can always email and call and reach out to your representative, because that is our job, is to help you and to also advocate on your behalf. So that's another way. I've talked to a lot of small business owners in the past 2 months now, and help them to navigate. And I have check-in calls with them to make sure that them and their employees are getting the things that they need. And a lot of people, like you said, are still saying, I haven't received one check. What is going on?
Right.
You know, and again, it's across the board. I'm talking to family in New York, and people haven't received a check yet either. And it's because the system is very overwhelmed, because unemployment insurance is tied to the federal government.
Right.
It's not a system that is just a state system by itself. And part of what they want to do is, and not saying that people are doing this, but they want to prevent fraud. They want to prevent people who don't need this money from getting it, especially.
Well, that doesn't seem to be working.
Well, that's a different story. That's when we talk about.
But before we make that switch on that, but I would like to stay in this vein that she's in now, because when we look at the things that are being revealed from CV-19, and the fact is that Blacks disproportionately are feeling the brunt of the impact, and we recognize the systemic racism that has led us to where we are right now. So in your mind, in addressing, and me being unapologetically Black, because I don't mix the reality of that, because everywhere we go, whenever the Black agenda comes up and it just becomes a straight Black agenda, people don't want to listen, they don't want to participate, blah, blah, blah. So we always have to be coupled with something, Black and brown, Black and this, or Black and that. But I'm unapologetically, in all the programs in which we deal with, say, okay, about Black people. So now that we understand the systemic realities and the injustice that we've always known and is highlighted, what are we doing as politicians today in the state of Oregon to address or mitigate that reality so that we don't find ourselves in the same situation that people are in the rest of the country? Because most of my family is from Georgia, and I'm hearing all about what's going on down in there, and they're really uncomfortable about these things. So, and I know that Oregon is just slightly a little bit different, but how different are we, Representative, and what are we doing to mitigate that reality in your mind?
Yeah, so for me, again, the way that I approach everything is through wealth creation, right? I understand what wealth does for community. It gives you freedom, right? It's not just about the money. It's about what having money gives you, is time, the time to engage civically, the time to show up and to even run for office. People don't realize, but to be an elected official, they don't pay you any money. My monthly, can you get, I just to ask, how much do you think I make a month as a legislator?
I'd say about $3,500.
What about you, Fawn?
I've always wondered that question. So I think it must be, God, I think it's probably between 35 and 50 a year, divided by 12, carry the 1, separate the 2. What is it? John might be right in the ballpark.
Yeah, it's $2,600 a month. That's poverty.
Yeah.
It is. That's not a joke. And that's not a joke.
That's the cost of rent here in inner northeast right now.
Exactly. So. And you know, part of that, keeping that pay at that rate is a barrier for entry for a lot of people who would be awesome at this job.
Well.
I myself, I'm young and I'm in my key earning years. Right. How do I reconcile doing this job, which is a full-time job, make no mistake, is a full-time job, with also running my own business? And what happens when I want to have kids, right? How do you balance that? So part of it is ensuring that the positions of power are set up to accommodate us, right? To take care of us as well, so that you have more Black and brown legislators. We do have a POC caucus. We're small but mighty, and we're doing a lot of great work. We're putting out press releases. We have special talks with the governor about POC issues, about Black issues, about ensuring, again, that I don't want our state of, I'm getting really riled up here, so I'm going to step back for a second.
Riled up, girl.
Yeah. I got your back.
Our state economist gave us a landscape that said, conservatively, based on the way things are right now, it'll take the state of Oregon 2 years to get back to where we were pre-COVID.
Wow.
Right?
And it's really been just maybe going into a month, and it would probably be 2 months. So that's kind of scary, considering that 2 months can do this level of damage.
And for me, I think about that and I say, well, what does that mean when we translate that for communities of color, right? Who are already behind, right? Who are already struggling, who are already in this underclass position by and large. What does that mean for us? We don't have 2 years. The wealth gap is already so wide. It's a chasm, right? So what do you do? I'm not interested in going back to what happened, what the state of things were before. We need aggressive and bold action to put us in a better position than where we've ever been, right? A lot of people have been using this COVID-19 to say, oh, it's really amplifying and magnifying the issues that are urgent and crippling the Black and brown communities, et cetera. And it's like, we didn't need this crisis to magnify it. We live it every day. You know what I mean? And so for me, it's like, well, if this is what it took for you to realize the intensity and the gravity of these issues on our communities, then you need to also use that same energy to invest in our communities, to put the money in, because it truly was a public-private partnership that created the systemic racism that exists and has held communities back from creating and accruing generational wealth. And so we need that same public-private partnership. And the caucus now, the POC caucus, we are doing everything that we can to ensure that happens. But again, we need more help, right? We can't just do it on a state level because it was a federal program. Institutional racism is a federal program. So we have to have it. We have to have it on all levels. I'm going to talk about the census really quickly because this year is our census year, and it's so important for us to be counted because we need that money to flow in. We also have an opportunity to add a seat in the House of Representatives in Congress if we are adequately counted, right? And there is a legacy of undercounting in Black and brown communities for good reason, but there's a legacy of it. And so we need to break out of that and realize that we're just doing ourselves a disservice by not being counted. And so we have to be counted. We have to put our money where our mouth is. We really have to have our actions match our values. That is one of the things that I say over and over again. I don't want lip service. I don't want people to keep telling me, oh, we see the problem. Fix it. We know how to fix it. Put the money in the community so we can fix it.
You came out with $2 trillion for a moment's notice for a virus. Black and indigenous Black people in this country, $5 billion, $50 billion would have resolved our issues in this country to some degree, at least a start as a plant that could have rectified any of these issues of injustice around the socioeconomic realities. They could have done that a long time ago. But it takes these types of things to begin. But the problem is we don't have champions like you continuing to push that agenda and continue to push that. So, which leads me to my next question. What's your thoughts about Black politics in Oregon? Where are we at? Do we believe, do we have adequate representation here? Do you feel that that should be something that we should begin to mitigate a little bit more and begin to sort of push into? So what's your take on where Black politics is today in Oregon?
I think we have great champions already sitting in positions of power. I think that they, so it's myself, Representative Bynum, Senator Frederick, and Senator Manning on the state level, who are elected officials fighting for Black people and Black rights. But again, you also have our community-based organizations and institutions like the Urban League and like PALF and like Black Future PAC and things like that. We have other organizations that are doing the work, right? Like it can't just, what I'm trying to say is it can't just be a top-down thing, right? It has to be a collective, right? It has to be, it's teamwork, right? Like I'll take, for example, any bill that comes in front of legislators to deliberate and then to vote on, we have a slew of people coming into our offices to tell us why we should vote for or against this bill, right? Those people also help write bills. Mm-hmm. They also help to, put pressure on the other side, the Senate side, as well as the House. They also put pressure on our other agencies, like the housing agency and our Department of Justice, et cetera. There are all of these people who are doing that work. It's not just your legislators, it's your nonprofits. They're doing Coalition for Communities of Color. They're doing so much work to get the bills that we want to see passed, right? It's not just us, it's a community effort. And so for me, that's why I always go back to wealth, because one of the reasons why a lot of people are not engaged in their neighborhood associations or don't know who is running things in their communities on a more face-to-face level is because people are tired, they're overworked and under-resourced. And if you don't have time to even put food on the table, how are you going to have time to go rally and to go know who these people are and to go testify at City Hall or to testify in Salem? One of the bills that Representative Bynum put up that I was a chief sponsor on was the Crown Act, right? The Crown Act was a movement sweeping through the country that prevents employers from discriminating against people of color, Black people more specifically, based on our hair, right? You know how many times somebody who looks like me goes for a job interview and does something different to their hair to get the job? Yeah, I see it on national TV all the time. As us being a media company, I see
I want to follow that line if you don't mind, John. Two things kind of come to my mind around that, Akasha. Is one is like when you were talking about the census, and they make it very no holds barred that it's about money, power, and representation. And second is, I think John Washington, he's always been pushing, galvanizing the Black community. And so I want to go back to the Black community in specific, because as John mentioned earlier, often when you're talking about communities of color or funding or programs, it is a lumped basket, right? And usually, even in this COVID funding, it said we're prioritizing women and communities of color. And yet when you look at some of the demographics, you'll see that the Black male and probably the Native American are at the bottom. And they're at the bottom. They're the highest incarcerated, they're the least graduating, etc. Why do you think the specific language doesn't say Black males, women, and minorities? Why are Black males never called out as being one of the most vulnerable communities?
Woo, girl, I'm raising up a beast around here with you, ain't it? I'm sorry. Thank you for dropping that. I mean, because I was so excited and with Aisha's been that energy that I forgot my primary. Thank you.
Oh, John, that really is your question. I don't mean to.
No, but that's okay.
I just took notes in some meetings earlier.
I appreciate it.
I think that's a great question. It goes back to the history of this country. There's nothing more scary to this country than an educated and powerful Black man who is able to take care of his community. That is scary. And I think that people, again, I think, John, you're right, that every time we want to talk about Black people and the Black community and Black specifically, we are told to include everybody else, right? And it's unfair. And I think we have to stop doing it, right? And I think that is why, again, we have to create more leaders, right? More Black leadership in these spaces. We can't, it's like in Congress, right? Because there is a wellspring, there are a lot more Black representatives. They have a Black caucus, right? If we had a Black caucus in the Oregon State Legislature, it would only be 4 of us. And then we're split 2 and 2 on each side, right? And our caucuses do different things. We start bills in different ways. So it's hard to do. So I think that we can't answer that question without talking about racism, right? Without talking about the legacy of this country of always being scared of a Black man. My partner and I, we were talking about this last night, that this is COVID-19 and the response that we're getting from a lot of white nationals right now, who are picketing on these steps and things like that, and going to their state capitals with fully loaded assault rifles, automatic weapons, and standing on the front steps. If that were us, you and me, John, and Stephen, we couldn't live to tell that tale.
National Guard.
We would
not, right? We would not. And it goes back to the same thing where they're seen as patriots. They're seen as rallying for their country. They want to die for America, right? And our people have died for America. We have the foundation of this country is our blood and sweat and tears, right? And we continuously have gone and fought across the world in frontline regiments, right? And come back in that uniform to be lynched. Right? And so there's nothing scarier than Black people who have power, who are ready to take hold of themselves and their communities. One of the reasons why I advocate for wealth is it's so that we stop having to look to anybody else to feed us or to take care of us. To have our own. There's something powerful about having a Black doctor when I go to the doctor, right? There's certain things I don't have to explain, right? There's something powerful about going to a grocery store that's owned by a Black person and know that I'm not going to get followed around the store, right? There's something powerful about if you're incarcerated, right? Something happens, you make a mistake, you honestly make a mistake and you're not wrongfully incarcerated, right? You're incarcerated and you get out of jail and you return to a community that is owned by people who look like you. They're more than ready and willing to give you a second chance. They're able because they have the capital to do so, right? That is the kind of wealth that I want to see. That's the kind of change that I want to see. I really am excited about ownership in our community and what and wealth and what it will enable us to do. It'll enable us to have school curriculums that are representative of our legacy and our history and not an erasure of our contributions. And also not having us believe that our history starts at slavery, right? That we have a long, proud legacy. We're the first people, right? We have a long, proud legacy. The most wealthy person in the world was Mansa Musa, and that was an African man, right? And so it's like, how do we get to a place where we have our own and we're not genuflecting and going on our knees to these people and to the government asking to be seen worthy, asking to be seen as full people. The rally cry Black Lives Matter is a real one. It's a visceral one because we've been told that we were not people at the inception of this country. We were 3/5 a person.
Girl, I'm you. Whoever.
So I think that, to me, that is why, again, it's so hard for people to call out Black.
Yeah.
But John,
go ahead, Fawn.
so just to speak to your plan to galvanize the Black community, and I think Mr. Washington speaks about this a lot, is we need to galvanize the Black community because there's no doubt in Oregon that there's a lot of great organizations that have strong Black leadership that are doing good things. So for some reason, it doesn't seem like those really good things are echoing in a chorus, but more like solos. So what can you recommend that we do so that is more of a chorus and less of a solo artist, if that makes sense?
One of the things that I love to do is listen. And I think that it has to start with listening. I think that there are a lot of grievances and a lot of pain. It's like this this new line of thought when you're entering a relationship, right? People tell you need to unpack your childhood trauma and your baggage before you can get into a relationship with another person, before you can start a healthy relationship. And I think that that's what needs to happen on a community level. We have to unpack our traumas, right? We have to come from a place of listening to one another and seeing where we really want to find commonalities in what we're fighting for, right? And another thing that I'm going to put out there that is very true is that let's not pretend that Black institutions have not been trying to build coalition in the Black community for centuries, right? But what happens when we do? Governmental bodies come in and infiltrate those bodies and break it up, right? The Panthers did not dissolve because of a lack of leadership and because of a lack of transparency and a lack of accountability. It's because of COINTELPRO, and we know that, right? So it's like, sometimes I get a little bit aggravated when people act like the Black community doesn't know how to get together and form coalition and do all of these things. We've done it over and over and over again, only to have our government undermine our efforts.
Sounds like Prosper Portland.
Yeah, so one more question, John. And then I'd like you to...
Like the conversation around Prosper.
This got real crazy, guys. I didn't know we were going here.
No.
That's okay, sis, because this is what unapologetically Black look like. You know, we ain't coming, look, we ain't mixing our bars in this one.
No,
Okay.
and I think, you know what, you're absolutely right. I think there is a resurgence right now, right before this pandemic, especially in Northeast Portland. There, you know, with the onboarding of it was called the Hill Block Committee, announced the Russell Williams Project Working Group, who is deciding about the development that legacy deeded back to them as a result of, unfairly displacing them back in the 70s. And that is like a 25 to 30 led all Black committee. And it's been beautiful to watch them go through this process. And in fact, there's a lot of properties and a lot of Black-led development that's happening in Northeast Portland, right? So when you look at your development background and how to build communities that are welcoming and also are have share investment opportunities and shareholding opportunities for wealth creation, I think you can look to Northeast Portland as still a very strong and viable a place to do that. So as we're looking at sort of recovery now, even though it's been 2 months or almost 2 months or going into 2 months, if we would look at recovery, I think Mr. Washington was bringing up earlier in a meeting that we had, like, you're hearing a lot of people cry, like, let's get back to work, ... And Mr. Washington is always saying, as usual, but we can't go back to work as usual now. You know, it can't be as usual. We can't go back to work and have, poor communities living paycheck to paycheck. We can't go back to work and having a lot of people not having health care. We can't go back to work and, receiving the bottom of the wealth. I think Black businesses are often, and John, why don't you speak to the capability factor, the ICE factor,
I think that when you were on that, this whole issue about the white man's ICE being colder than a Black man's ICE, it was rooted in perception, and how that's being sold. But I think the other part that is really important about going back to as usual, it's almost like saying, that old saying is when you think you can put your clothes back on, and when people have seen you naked, you can just put your clothes on and it'll take it out of their head. It's not gonna. Once you seen naked, you seen naked. So America has been seen naked. And we're wide out there, we're open, and it's been seen. The question is, what is it going to look like when they start putting the clothes back on and not addressing and acting as if, what do they call that, gaslighting, to continue to get us to say or to think that this never happened, or you never saw what you saw. But for me, it's rooted more in how do we begin to continue enhance or continue to develop three perceptions in people, in Black people. The perception of capability, the perception of influence, and the perception of significance. What I'm in support of these days is reinforcing constructs and environments that reinforce that in Black people. Is that this button of inferiority somehow goes away. Because I think it's really important that we recognize on the world stage, the only thing that doesn't support longevity is the fact that we do have an ejection button somehow. Black people tend to be, you push something in them, if it touches any of the historical relevance in terms of the racism in this country, it automatically gets, most of us get ejected as a result of it. And that goes all the way back to sports. The coach used to tell a young kid, go out there on that court and tell that key player and call him a nigger and watch him punch you so you throw him out of the, get him thrown out of the game. So it's all of these kinds of mitigating things that we've been able to experience. So the question I'm having, though, is now that we're coming out of this, where are we going, how we begin to address some of these things from, first and foremost, just the human aspect of the condition of the people in the environment. How do we begin to make sure that they're okay? And number one, the health problems that we have as a result of the long-term stress factors that we have. People can't go to work. There's always something around this thing coming at them, bombing them. They ain't got enough food. They ain't got insurance. They ain't got a car. They ain't got.
Sure.
So anyway,
or even going back to work to their 2 and 3 jobs, right? Because they've been out of 2 and 3 jobs, and now when they go back to work, it's time to start those 2 and 3 jobs up again.
Yeah, I mean, that's why a lot of this presidential debate season, the Democratic nominee season, you had at least one candidate, Andrew Yang, and then several people latched onto the idea of a universal basic income.
Right.
America is the richest country in the world, and we still have people going to sleep hungry. And it's not because we don't have abundance. We have so much, but it's hoarded, right? And so it's like this this, like you said, John, earlier, you know, they didn't have any money for anything, for free school, for free college, for free this, for any of this. And then all of a sudden this happened and the economy was threatened. And all of a sudden they found trillions of dollars, right? And so it's like, for me, it's, again, like you said, we got naked. You showed us your cards, right? It's like, now we know what's capable. We know that you were BSing us all this time. That you had the ability, to allocate this money and to mandate it for X, Y, and Z as you saw fit, but you were scared, right? And you didn't see everybody as worthy, because that's the real thing, right?
Woo,
right?
Girlfriend, knock on it. That's what it is.
With this president right now, right? With galvanizing his base, right? And telling them that they should die for the economy. That to me is insane, because the economy we made that up. We made money up. We made up all the rules. If we want something else, we could make that up too.
Easy.
Right? And so you're asking people to die, to put their lives, their children's lives in danger, to fill your pockets. That's the level of greed at the core of this administration, and at the core of this government. And the thing about it is that I don't believe that it's just Trump, that there have been Democratic leaders who also have put the economy above the people.
Exactly.
Right? There's a reason why corporations are able to file for bankruptcy, but it's hard for you and I to. They can do it at a drop of the hat, get a bailout, and come back stronger. But if you and I ran into financial trouble, it could ruin us for the next 30 years.
Yes.
I could die and it'll ruin my kids' chances of owning a home.
Right.
And so it's like, this is all made up. None of this is natural law, right? And so if we wanted to make a change, we could, because we have the pen.
Right. You know, sister, we do
me, that's what it takes.
No, and I'm with you. Listen, Fawn, you got any other questions? Because we've been at this now for an hour. Man, this sister, look.
Well, I mean, we could talk forever, but
yeah. I mean, because we just need to figure out how we get behind this sister and support her, whatever it is that she's trying to do. And okay, let me tell you something, Ms. Spencer. Whenever you go into war somewhere, you call me up. You hear me? I go to war with you any day. You hear? And but I know we in this together. Yes, Dad, I'm with you on this one. Let's put this together, though.
Yeah, I want to make sure at the close too we get her shared document.
I can send it to you right now. Yeah, I'll send it to you right now.
And I guess for me, you know, and as we even sit here, and the fact that we have 15 years worth of business on the books here in Oregon, and that we look at every one of those pathways that we've submitted for that have been denied, you know, and as we pass through and try to mitigate that and look back into why and so forth, you get, even with the Prosper City funds, that we hear that it's nothing but a committee of all white people who know nothing about Black people in our communities and allocating these funds, you know? And so it's just first come, first serve, and blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. So, and then you get people who don't seem to get and understand that the systemic forms of racism that has occurred to Black people in this country, those systems are continued to be modified upon. And they modify in accordance in ways and do it. It's like, and I was listening to Fawn read one of the bank application things, and the questions that it asks to be able to omit you off of that, out of that. Specifically, as I was listening to her read those questions, the first thing that came to my mind is a lot of Black men who have businesses probably fit those profiles right there. And it's about mitigating. It's not as a result of what they might have done to do something incorrectly, but when we have a system that continues to force us into those pathways, we get no honor, we get no exemptions, we get no breaks. And even though those realities and those pathways are acknowledged and revealed. So anyway, but we've been at this for a minute. Black Beat is down to get to it. Unapologetically Black points and Black issues. we sitting here talking to a sister right now on this phone that we just hope that the rest of the Black politicians see her coming. And if they don't see her, I hope that everybody begin to see her coming and make sure that we find a place for her. Okay, so go ahead, Fawn.
Representative Akasha Lawrence Spence. So so your term is coming up possibly in May, in November?
No, so there's a primary right now in May. People are running for the seats. And so somebody is going to win that primary, and whomever wins that primary is probably going to win the general, because the district that I'm in is very Democratic, and a Republican has not won in the past 30, 40 years. And there's no other, because we're a two-party system, there's no other real competition. So whomever wins the primary is going to win the seat, and will take office. I leave office January 20-something of 2021, and they'll take office then.
Oh, in the meantime, you can, how my man, who was it? Not DMX said, I'm slipping, I'm falling, and I gotta get up. I gotta get up so I can tear some shit up. Sister, you stick around here for a little bit, you hear me? Because we hoping like that, that you can begin to influence the next generation of people who are involved in politics, and at least keep an open head and an open mind the way you approach some of these things. Because as a person that's been at the front row of the United of America's major growth over the last 50 years, I've had a front row seat, and I see you coming. And I'm glad that you are on the road, on the way, coming, and keep on doing what you're doing, you hear? Because we have a lot of respect, sister, for what you're doing. And you are the model of politics that I would like to see us have more of. And as a result of that, I am in support of you 150%. You hear me, sister? So anything that we can do around here at Flossin or Northeast Business Association, any of that stuff, give us
I'll
we'll step in at you.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you, Fawn. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate it. Okay, you have another thing?
I want to get that. So you had mentioned something about a shared Google, a living Google.
I sent it to you.
Oh, you sent it to me. Okay. Can
I emailed it to you.
I just got it.
You got it, Stephen? Yeah, I sent it to all of you guys.
Okay. And what was that again? Can you just say it?
Oh, it's a shared, it's a living Google document that spells out some small business and employee resources. So it helps you to figure out, like, what is this program? Who's created this program? What can I do? How do I apply? What are some of the facts? Who can help me navigate this program? And what are the starting times and the closing times for the program?
And can we share that with people?
Please share that with as many people as you like. It is again, it's a living document. So as we get information, we are constantly adding to it.
Okay, so we could probably do like a blog post, and we could start like blasting it out to other businesses and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then, so are we still recording, Stephen?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know, John, if you want to ask her about, where she's going to go after this, or what she wants people to do while she's still, like, how can people come and what can they do? Can they write to you? Can they gather in groups? Well, we can't really gather in groups, and what can we do to push the, sort of the topics that we discussed here today to the next level through legislation?
How can we help you get some of your agendas done?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that question. I'm not sure what's next in terms of politics, but in terms of wealth creation, I do own a small business. It's a real estate development company that helps small business owners, and specifically targeting Black people, own their own buildings. So not just own the business, but own where their business is located, if they have a brick and mortar. Because again, I really believe in ownership of community resources and bringing that back for people, because that is a way to not only accrue wealth, but to gain capital through which you can support and help your community, right? So I'm not sure in terms of politics. I run a women of color group called Melanated, where I help champion financial empowerment. I champion entrepreneurship, champion community stewardship, champion civic engagement. I will be hosting something around the primary to get people to understand, like, who are these candidates? What do they stand for? What's there's going to be some measures on the ballot for Metro coming up, and getting people involved in what those mean and why we should vote yay or nay, or what the implications are for your daily life. And, figuring out different things. There are a lot of things cooking, a lot of things that I would love to see us do on a state level. When Fawn and I were talking about the PPP program, and how banks were able to use a first come, first serve method. And that by and large prevented women of color businesses, which is the largest sector, Black women, 176% more than non-Black women, right. Creating businesses and creating ownership in our communities. We have a hard time accessing capital and doing more to ensure that not only can our businesses get off the ground, but they can grow, because you need more funding as your business keeps, operating. You need to have more funding infused into your business. And then also to ensure that you can help another business, somebody else coming up, right? So these are all of the things that I'm passionate about, and I've continued to work on, and I will continue to work on with or without this seat. So.
Well, we'd like you to come around and talk to us a little bit more about the business development stuff that you have and some of that, because as the Seoul District Business Association, we want to incorporate more of this methodology and this idealism, this idea that you may have as to what you'd like to see. We'd like to be able to talk more about that to see how we can implement it with you if we can, okay? Yeah, give you all the support that we need, because we do have a whole lot of members and a whole lot of businesses in our district that can use your support, use your methods, use your ideas. And so let's make sure that we can circle back and schedule another time outside of the politics of this and look at the small business ideas and see where we can begin to go in that direction, okay? So if there's some opening there, let's just set the time up, set the appointment. Let's see if we can make it happen, all right?
That sounds great. And it was such a pleasure, honestly, talking with you today, John, talking with you, Fawn, meeting you, even though you're off camera. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, you gave me some joy today. You gave me a little bit of hope. I'm going to tell you, sister, because let me tell you what I've been up against and what we've seen in the past in this politic game. Girlfriend, let me tell you, you are a breath of fresh air. And I hope that somehow or another they can find more money to keep you. I'll see you later on. Yeah, fun. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative.